Hello, and welcome to Fresh Blood, a podcast about killing it after 40, where we prove that new blood does not necessarily equal young blood. Here to discuss what it takes to have continued success through life, I'll be your host, Jolie Downs. With over 20 years of executive recruiting experience, I've learned how much we can grow and be inspired by other people's stories. I'm excited to share that with you here on Fresh Blood. Today we are speaking with Henrik Gyor. He is a consultant at Another Damn Consultancy, where he advises clients on digital asset management. Henrik is also a proficient podcaster, being a part of the podcasting world since 2010 with 8 podcasts created to date. Henrik is also a professional speaker, blogger, and author, having written 7 books in the past 3 years. Very impressive. Before becoming an expert in digital asset management, Henrik was a digital photojournalist, a professor, and a senior media specialist. I'm really looking forward to learning more about your story, Henrik. Can you tell us a little bit about the path that led you to this point in your life?
Yeah, thanks, Julie. I appreciate you having me on the show. How I got to where I am today is basically a long story, but I'll make it brief. Basically, I graduated school knowing that I wanted to be a photographer. And so I became a photographer, and I aspired to become a magazine photographer. Mm-hmm. And the lesson learned was, be careful what you wish for, you might get it. So I ultimately did work through newspapers and magazines and finally became a staff magazine photographer, one of the few left at the time. And I watched that industry dwindle quite quickly in the journalism and photojournalism world very rapidly with the advent of digital and the advent of journalism becoming less than it was in the past, and realized that creating is fun. However, there must be something else that I could do that might be more beneficial and have a longer lasting future. Looking at that wall, I realized that in the advent of digital, there was a lot of things to manage that were after they were created. And while creating is fun, managing, what I ultimately learned, pays far better to manage the finished product. And people need to be able to find that digital stuff, which is how I created basically my career of managing digital media, whether it's audio, video, text, graphics, and photos in the world of digital asset management. Basically, I went from journalism into very quickly managing digital media for a variety of different organizations. First, it was in finance. And then I realized that creating wasn't so much fun anymore when I had to just photograph older people just shaking hands all day long. Far less. And so the luster of photography wore off. And I actually don't take pictures anymore at all, aside from with my iPhone. And basically all I do is help organizations manage their digital media as consultants. Once I realized, and literally an executive at a Fortune 500 company asked, I was like, well, we don't really the company you work for, but we really like you and we really like how you do it. I was like, okay, well, thank you. And that works well. And so that basically put the other drawing on the wall saying, I better start my own firm. So I did. And so I own my own consultancy called Another Damn Consultancy, as you mentioned earlier, where I do that.
And that was your motivation. So basically finding out that your company didn't have quite as good of a reputation as you were building for yourself.
Exactly.
And what was that like for you to go out on your own? Because it's a big decision.
It is, yeah. And so there was a big reluctance there, right? There's, how am I going to do all this marketing and how am I going to do this? How am I going to find clients and stuff? Because I couldn't steal. I already had a contract. I'm not going to steal my existing clients from the company I was working for at the time, because that wouldn't be fair or legal. So what I decided is, hold on, I'm already blogging. And a year after blogging, I decided I would take my most read blog posts, which had actually a global audience, interestingly enough, after my second blog post, which at the time, back in 2010, was pretty good at the time, and realized that it resonated with people because I was talking about the pain of finding your own stuff within your own organization and how to do it properly. And people weren't talking about it. So I found a niche basically to blog and then ultimately to podcast about. So I took my first 40 most read blog posts and I made monologues for my first podcast episodes.
Oh,
Quickly
really?
found out that's boring. Monologues are like that typically, even if you have an amazing voice, doesn't really matter, regardless of what you're talking about. So I've figured out, I'm sure there's other people I could speak to about digital asset management or pick another niche topic. And why not reach out to people and say, hey, can I interview you about this topic, about the thing that you do on a daily basis, and see if there's similarities or differences to what we do. And so I've now recorded over 200 episodes for just that podcast around that,
Wow.
and it's still going. So that's how that works well.
Yeah, and you really become an expert on that
Yeah.
topic.
Yeah,
Yes,
for sure. Thank you.
clearly, after spending that many hours.
Mhm.
But go on. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, not at all. And later, after I recorded about 100 some episodes of interviews, I thought audio is one channel. And at the time, podcasts were getting popular, but not as popular as they are now, for the sake of argument. So why not try to diversify that? And I already have it in audio form. What if I had transcriptions of these so people could read them too? And it would also help people who can't hear or who have hard of hearing or any disability or accessibility challenges like that. Or maybe they just want to pick out the juicy bits and just read that part. Sure, they're allowed to do that too. So I figured out, why don't I do a Kickstarter project, which is basically crowdfunding, and ask my audience, if you want transcripts of my podcasts, pay for it, and I'll give you a book of the transcripts of my first 100 plus episodes, transcribed, and give it to you for a set fee, which was already basically considered a reward. And so it took me a few months to do the groundwork and figure out who was going to do all this and how they were going to do it and how quickly I could do it and all that fun stuff. And basically I launched it around, I think it was in spring of 1 year, and reached actually more than my goal for funding. Because if you're not familiar, Kickstarter is an all or nothing platform. You either get funded at 100% or more, or all the money goes back to the individuals that tried to fund you. And you get nothing. So I got funded at about 103% within 30 days. I transcribed all of the podcasts. I wrapped it up into an ebook, which most people opted in for, and a printed book, which a few people wanted this, even though it cost a ridiculous amount of money to make a printed book that had over 500 pages. So I did that because people asked for it. So if they were willing to pay for it, there's a market. Yep. So I did that. And to this day, my podcast is still transcribed because people want it. And it actually helps the SEO, big surprise, for my podcast and my blog.
That's fantastic. Now, you taught the Kickstarter aspect, and these are all things that as you're going along, you're learning these new skills. Are you teaching them to yourself? How are you adding these on? You're stacking these on?
Yes. So I find a deficit in the things that I want to do. Either I hire someone to do it because it's not worth my time, or I learn it myself in my own time and figure out, okay, do I need to do this? Should I be doing this myself? Ask those risk versus reward questions. And it's like, is this going to benefit me in the future or not? Can I teach it, right? Aside from teaching myself, can I think about teaching this to other people? And yes, I did. I created a book. One of my other books that I wrote was how to launch a Kickstarter based on my own experience. Yes. But that wasn't good enough because I only raised a few $1,000s, which is very common, honestly. The average Kickstarter, I think, raises about $1,000 to $10,000, which was the price range of what it cost to transcribe my book and create it. What I did is I interviewed other people who raised tens of thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and millions of dollars, because repeatedly. And so understand, what does it take to level up to that level? And so I interviewed these people, figured out what it takes to do that. And now you can read it in a book, because that's how you learn, right? You learn from people who leveled up to getting to a better stage than you. Does that make sense?
Exactly. And is this how you've written 7 books in the past 3 years?
Mm-hmm. Yep. So what I figured out is there's a system to my madness, if you will. What I do is I interview people, then I transcribe it with their knowledge and make a book out of it from the transcript, with a heavy editing, of course, because we would have to remove the ums and the so's and all that fun stuff, and make it a little bit more legible and readable. But realistically speaking, I figure out a niche topic of interest to me, and obviously it has to be interest to my audience too. Any audience that has usually is lacking a voice per se, or doesn't have enough said about it. And so there's a collective knowledge by professionals that do something, let's just call it niche topic X, and figure out what is that and how do they do it? How is it different in this sector versus that sector, because sometimes, like, I do one about user adoption, meaning people adopting a product or service. So that's called the User Adoption Podcast. I did one about that. I did one on rights management, meaning the intellectual property rights management of music, of photos, of video, of you name it. I did one on tagging, meaning metadata. Very dry subject, but people know what it is. So I asked the top companies in the world that do machine tagging and how they do it. And I also talked to the people who do the top companies in the world that do human tagging, meaning people actually tagging photos, videos that you will commonly find in, say, Getty Images or Adobe or at Netflix or wherever, and finding all that stuff so you can actually literally find it, because it's not just findable based on the image, it's findable based on the text you type in, just like at Google.
That's really interesting. I love what you're doing, obviously, because that's what I would like to do myself. So
Of course.
I love that you've repeated this over and over with continued success. Now, I'm curious, what do you feel has been a key to your continued success in life?
I think it's curiosity. So you have to continually itch that curiosity scratch, if you will. You have to scratch that itch, if you will, and figure out what is that. Because I consume a lot of media. I consume a lot of books, honestly. Honestly, I consume audiobooks because it's quicker to digest and easier to digest for me, because my ears are more available than my eyes on a daily basis. And I can cook or drive or whatever while listening to an audiobook and still consume it and understand it and digest it.
Great.
So I think it's about curiosity. That's the root of it, and remaining curious throughout. So you have a lifelong learning, essentially. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, I love it. I'm a highly curious person myself, and I think it's a great thing to have throughout life in all aspects, if you ask me.
I agree.
So now, what has been, because you've done a lot here in books, podcasting, you fulfilled your first goal of being the photographer. So what has been your greatest success throughout life, and what have you learned from it?
I think pivoting has been my best strength, of being able to switch gears, whether it's doing media X versus media Y, media format X, like blogging versus writing books in long form, or switching to consulting versus working for someone, working on my own versus working for someone, or vice versa. Because I still sometimes get embedded in said company for a time period to fix a large problem and do something like that. So it's really about being able to change, almost in a chameleon sense, saying, okay, I'm now touching a green leaf, so I need to become green too, in that sense.
Oh yeah,
use an analogy.
So
Exactly.
important. Yes. What about the flip side of it? What have been some of your bigger challenges in life or obstacles that you've had to overcome, and what you've learned from them?
I think if I've found an obstacle, I usually learn my way out of it or hire my way out of it, where I hire a contractor to fix the problem. I don't like doing accounting, so I hire a CPA to do it, right? Back to the marketing of my business, I figured out I already do blogging and I already do podcasting. That is my marketing. And I do not advertise my services because people know of me through word of mouth that I've created, or I've created content like this to spread that word and spread value to people, so that they understand that I'm going to provide them value regardless, so that they understand what I'm coming to them for. And not only having a diverse skill set and experiences, but also being able to do it well because I've done it many times. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yep. Because you are so good at the pivoting, and I think this is an important topic, especially with everything that we've gone through in the past year. I know many people have had to think about pivoting because of obviously the situation. If someone is struggling right now because of COVID, because they've been laid off, is there any best advice that you would give someone to help them either find their right next opportunity or figure out what the right thing is for them to be doing?
Sure, yeah. So there's several things. One is I would try to look at some and gain some more patience, if you don't have any, or a very limited amount, and also some self-awareness of, number one, what are your self-limiting beliefs and how are you going to overcome those? So because if we hit a certain age or a certain look or whatever, we may have some deeply embedded self-limiting beliefs. And if we remove those and look at what's the flip side of that, if you invert them. Is that a superpower? Is that a good thing? Or is it just noise that needs to get out of the way? Right? If that makes sense.
Yes.
So you need to realize, what are you telling yourself that may be limiting your own opportunities, whether it's for work or something else. Say again?
We do that all the time too.
Yeah, I think a lot of people do. And if you're self-aware of it and listen to your own self and quiet yourself based on your list of, say, priorities. So if you look at, say, the 25-5 rule, where you list your top 25, let's just call it priorities or things you want to do or accomplish, aside from the generic get a job or love my spouse or whatever that might look like.
Overall, I like this. Okay.
Yeah. So your goal setting, right? And you look at the top 25 and you list them in priority order. So you can't have a pile of ones or zeros for that matter. You literally list them in priority order. And that priority order may shift given the time period or what's going on in your life. But you look at that 25 list, the list of 25 or more, and you remove the bottom 20. And you just focus on the top 5. And then on a daily basis, you look at that number 1 and say, how can I get further on that number 1? And if I've already done that, go to number 2, and then number 3, and then number 4. And that's how you focus on goals, right? Because you need to understand the risk versus reward of all those. If I don't do this, what happens? You may not die necessarily, or you might, depending on what that priority is. I don't know. That's up to you to decide. But you need to list those out and figure out what those are for yourself and revisit them on a regular basis. I try to revisit them on a weekly or a monthly basis so that they're in line with my spouse, with the people I love, with the people I work with, and understand this is, where do you want to go with this? What are your intentions? What are my intentions, more importantly? And make them overt whenever I can. Because if you're transparent about it, if you have other people, if you tell people about what your goal is, they may hold you accountable saying, oh, were you able to do whatever that goal happens to be that you mentioned? And especially whether you tell it to a friend, family, coworker, or whatever, you can tell them, and then they'll come back to you next time you see them and say, oh, how was that? Or you can even ask them to hold you accountable to it, right?
Which helps, yes.
Yes, for sure.
I love this. It's so important. You have to make your goals in order to get further in life, because let's be honest, you can't get anywhere unless you know where you want to get to. But I love that you just laid out that this is the best way to stay focused on those goals. And it is a daily thing. And then you look at the goals every day and you take those little steps each day. And that's how you get to where you want to be. It's the little steps. It's the daily little steps that move you slightly forward. And they're manageable. That's what makes it manageable too.
Totally.
So that's a great breakdown.
Yeah, but it's not a to-do list in the sense that of the things, because they're time-based. That there's an acronym called SMART. It's not just the word SMART, but it's an acronym which stands for specific, measurable, actionable, meaning I can actually do it, right? Realistic, meaning it's not like I'm going to create peace by tomorrow or anything, or boil the ocean. And it's time specific. So meaning you can do it within this time frame. And if I work at it every day for this period of time, when I have the energy and the time, money is not necessarily much of the problem. It's usually time is the finite resource that everyone has. Whether you look at a billionaire or a homeless person, a successful person or unsuccessful person, it's really how they manage their time. When you're prioritizing your goals, you're literally listing on your calendar when you're going to do X. And if you do it in a small chunk, this is my recommendation, if you do it in a small chunk rather than saying, for the next 12 hours, I'm going to write a book. Right? That's not going to work because no one really operates that way in a sustainable way. But if you do it in, say, for an hour or a half hour per day, I'm going to write my book, this part of my book. I'm working on my table of contents or chapter 6 or whatever, or my characters or whatever that happens to be. Then it's more manageable for literally all the things you're going to do during your entire week.
Yes, I love it. I love that. The small chunk each day, it does make it much more manageable. So you can do it. So you actually do it. Yeah. Because of all these things that you've done and the pivots that you've gone through, I'm curious, has your definition of success changed through the years?
Yeah, I think it has. Yeah. Early on in my career, I was like, I need to make X dollars a year. So that honestly changes based on a lot of factors. Yes, I need to make X to put food on the table and pay for the house and all that fun stuff. But if you really look at how much you actually need, there's a realistic number of what you actually need to make per year to achieve what you may consider happiness or whatever. And then there's extra. You need to realize what that number is, wherever you happen to live, however you happen to live, whomever you live with, right? Because you may be able to combine incomes or not. I've been fortunate enough to be able to double my take-home pay several times in my career, and obviously there's room to cut that back if things like COVID happen,
Mm-hmm.
and go from, say, many large clients that pay me a stupid amount of money to do what I do, versus many small clients that can pay me for just a fraction of my time per week. So that's one thing that I've done over the past year, is broken that down to much smaller bite-sized chunks where you don't have to pay a stupid amount of money for my time as a consultant on a variety of things.
Speaking of which, because digital management, this is a big thing for all of us, is there any really quick advice that you would give the everyday user to help them with that situation?
It depends. It probably starts with your phone by today's standard, or your computer. Backups really help, of whether you're changing phones or changing computers, or
Yep.
because your hard drive will fail at some point, whether it's on your phone or your computer. And having it in the cloud can help, as long as where it is. And the true measure of digital asset management is, can someone who didn't create it find it within a few seconds?
No, I can't.
So that's the ultimate goal, is if I didn't create it and I wasn't involved in the acquisition or creation of said thing, photo, video, whatever, can someone find it on somewhere? Let's just say a website, a computer, whatever, your phone. If you hand them your phone, could they find that photo? A little tip that I showed someone recently is, your phone, like modern Android smartphones or iPhones with iOS, if you go to the Photos app itself, of all the photos that you've taken, there's AI already built in, where it'll recognize, like somebody was telling me, was very proud of their stack of wood that they had cut up in the past several years from a tree that they cut. And they said, and they couldn't find it on their phones. So why don't you just type in wood at the top on the search bar of your Photos app?
Oh,
And he found it instantaneously.
oh, that's amazing. I didn't
Because
realize that.
because the AI actually exists that will recognize certain people, places, and things, right, in your photos. So if you've self-identified yourself or your spouse or your kids or whatever, you can find all the pictures of that individual, or of your car or your house or a location or whatever. It'll find that for you very
That's
quickly.
cool. That's fantastic. I know you need to be wrapping up here. So before we get out, I'm just curious, are there any specific habits you've adopted through the years that help you live a successful, fulfilled life?
So one is managing my time. One of the things that I've gotten used to in the past couple of years is using an app called Calendly, calendly.com,
Mhm.
where instead of scheduling my time and going, oh, can you do Tuesday? No, but you can do Thursday. What about 9 a.m.? No, but I can do 9 a.m. on Friday, and going back and forth, which is a massive waste of time. Calendly, I just send them a link. I make sure my calendar is up to date as far as when I'm available, and they book on my calendar
Great.
a fixed amount of time. And you can either book a 15-minute call or a 30-minute call on my calendar with the link that I provide. Otherwise, you're more than welcome to pay for my time.
And then it sends a reminder, which is very
Yes.
handy.
Yes. It sends both me and the individual, or individuals that are going to be on the call, a reminder. So it's a huge time saver. And then making sure that your calendar is up to date, whether it's for personal reasons, for health reasons, for sleep reasons, for eating, for time with your spouse, time with your kids, time for whatever. You make time and you literally schedule it. And so you have that flexibility of saying, I'm going to work between the hours of X and Y. Because in today's world, no one's managing your time aside from yourself. And so everyone will ask for your time, but will you give it is the question, right? So if you schedule time for said small task, the honey-do list or whatever that might be, or taking care of the car, taking care of the pets, taking care of spouse, kids, etc., work, or a project, whether it's a self-assigned project like we described. All my podcasts and books have been self-assigned. Most of my books weren't requested by anyone, with a few exceptions. And so they were self-assigned projects, which is how I've gained all this experience and done what I've done so far.
Really great advice. Yeah,
Thanks.
we're all scheduling other people's appointments because we can't forget those. But
Mm,
how many of us are actually scheduling our own projects in there and making sure that we're putting that time aside? I think that's brilliant. I love it.
Thanks.
And not only that, but the honey-do list, all those little things are very important as well. Henrik, thank you so much for joining us on Fresh Blood. I really enjoy your time and I've loved everything you've shared with us. I hope we connect again in the future. Take care. There is so much to learn from Henrik's story. When he found he was taking his own reputation more seriously than his company was, he went ahead and formed his own company, effectively protecting and building his own personal brand. He started blogging to continue building his presence and eventually decided to turn his blog posts into a podcast. When his first foray into podcasting didn't go quite exactly as planned, as Henrik admitted, his initial podcast monologues weren't super exciting, but he did not let that stop him. He learned from the experience, made some adjustments, and tried again. This is an absolute must for a successful life, learning from your experiences, making those adjustments, and trying again. For his podcast talking about digital asset management, he celebrated his 200th episode. He also took his podcast to the next step, transcribing the episodes, and then eventually started a Kickstarter campaign to help him turn those transcripts into a book. Then, once he was successful with that, he started interviewing people about their own Kickstarter campaigns and turned his experience and interviews into another book. He learned how to create a process for producing podcasts and books and then replicated it, churning out 7 books in 3 years and creating multiple streams of income and multiple branches of exposure, continuously building his personal brand. Absolutely brilliant. There are a lot of aspects of life that can be hacked this way. Once you create that winning process in whatever it is you're doing, you can then follow that same process for other things, replicating your success. This is what musicians, artists, social media professionals, woodworkers, and so many more do. What is your winning process? I loved that Henrik shared his key to success, which is curiosity. This is so important. Remaining curious will result in your naturally being a lifelong learner. I'm really not sure if there's anything that can bring you closer to a successful, fulfilled life than continuously learning through all of your years. Curiosity also makes your mind stronger, more observant of new ideas, thereby allowing you to more likely notice the opportunities that present themselves in your path. Not only that, curiosity boosts achievement, expands our empathy, strengthens our relationships, and increases our positive emotions and psychological well-being. Curiosity may have killed the cat, but it is keeping us humans feeling alive. Awaken your curiosity. Henrik's greatest strength has been his ability to pivot. This one is powerful. Being adaptable and able to switch gears when the time is needed, it's another big indicator of success. The world is constantly changing around us. Being able to shift in a new yet related direction will help you make a greater overall impact in life. It also contributes to the continuous growing we were talking about, adding those additional skills and experiences to your life that will contribute to your overall goals. When thinking about the right pivot, focus on what you know, the things that are working for you. Focus in on your strengths and then invest in those strengths and expertise that you currently have. I also loved Henrik's breakdown of goal setting. He advises giving yourself a quiet space to really think about and list out your priorities. Write them down, and this is important, write them down. At least your top 25. Then identify what your top 5 current goals are, moving the other 20 to the side for the time being, and focusing in on those top 5. On a daily basis, look at those goals and think about how you can take one step closer to each one. Henrik suggests scheduling time on your calendar for these goals as well, in small chunks to keep it sustainable. Remember, big accomplishments are simply a series of daily baby steps that eventually lead you to where you want to go. Revisit your goals on a weekly or monthly basis. Again, life is constantly changing, so keep checking in with yourself and make sure that you are aligned with everything that is currently important in your life. Make your goals transparent and share with others. Telling other people about your goals helps to hold you accountable and will spur more subconscious action. Then Henrik shared with us the SMART acronym, which was great, something to keep in mind for creating SMART goals. S for specific, your goals need to be clear and focused. What is it that you're trying to accomplish? Why is this important? Who is involved? Where is it located? Which resources are needed? M for measurable. How will you measure your goals or track your progress so that you stay motivated? A for actionable. Are the goals realistic and achievable? How will you accomplish your goal? R for realistic. Does this goal matter to you? Does it align with your relevant goals? Is it worthwhile? T for time specific. Can you accomplish your goal within a set time frame? Having a deadline to focus on will prevent everyday tasks from overtaking your long-term goals. Keep in mind that people tend to overestimate how much they can accomplish in 1 year, but underestimate how much can be accomplished in 3 years. So make your SMART goals and get excited about what's to come. Henrik also had excellent advice around moving yourself closer to your own success. He advises bringing that self-awareness to your own limiting beliefs. We all have them, often without realizing it. They're created through our own personal stories, through the things we've been told by family and friends, things we've absorbed from the constant onslaught of the media. There are so many different aspects influencing our beliefs. It makes me reflect on the story of the baby elephant. In the practice of training baby elephants, the first method they use is tying one of the elephant's legs with a rope and attaching it to a stake in the ground. Because these are baby elephants, a much smaller rope can be used and still keep that baby in place. The baby elephant will pull and pull on their rope, but will eventually learn that they can't break the rope. And so they give up. But elephants grow fast, and we've all seen a fully grown elephant. Enormous, right? And not an animal that a simple rope tied to a stake is going to stop, right? Except it does. That same thin rope that was used when they are babies continues to contain them as adults, tied to that simple stake, and they never try to break free. They never try to break free. They have accepted their limitations. You and I have too. You are constrained by the stories you tell yourself about your background. How many limitations have you accepted in life, either because of your own belief or that of others? How many limitations are you living that you haven't even realized? You are the one keeping your own self a captive. How do you know if you have these limiting beliefs in your life? You know because they are the negative beliefs. They are the beliefs that hold you back. The beliefs that tell you you can't do something. The beliefs that say you are not good enough. They are the beliefs that keep you from embodying your true self. It is time to start shining that flashlight of awareness on your own beliefs. Stop settling. Question yourself. Ask why you're thinking this way. It is time to crush, destroy, and replace any story of limitation in your head. You are glorious. You are a magnificent, unique, and unrepeatable person. You are a beast that can no longer be held by small, insignificant ropes of belief. That is my wish for us all, to finally recognize and kick off those invisible ropes holding us back. Until next time. Thank you for spending time with us on Fresh Blood. If you love this episode, please consider subscribing, rating, or giving us a review. I'm looking forward to connecting with you again on the next episode.